Good evening, folks. MOTOBOB here. This is just one of those perfect evenings for biking. We're starting to get in spring now. Nice blue sky, not too cold, it's not raining. And I've been working from home today, but I'm just on my way into town to pick my wife up. There's no better way to spend an hour or two now than out on the bike, even though there's plenty of traffic coming through Peckham. Still the best, isn't it? A few days ago I posted a video about drivers using their mobiles and the change in legislation, which means that you will get 6 points instead of 3 and a heavier fine. And of course, if you get 6 points in your first 2 years of driving, then you'd lose your license. And for those more experienced drivers, it can still mean trouble. If you get up to 12 points, you can end up in court and up to £1,000 and disqualification from driving. So there's quite a lot at stake there. And what we did, we counted how many people were yeah, we counted how many people we saw in their cars using their mobiles while they were driving, and we counted about 3 in the space of 6 miles. I didn't think that was too bad, but actually somebody commented saying that that's actually 1 every 2 miles, which, if you look at it that way, I suppose it isn't great. Anyway, I read a good piece on Biker and Bike today, which I'll link to below. It's a good website as well if you've never checked it out. But actually they explored how that change in legislation actually impacts bikers, because I didn't really think of it like that. I mean, obviously when you're riding you try and minimize distractions, but basically what they're saying is the exact same rules apply to you when you're on your motorcycle. So obviously if you've got your phone out in your hand and you're messing around with it, then you're going to get in trouble, and rightly so. But where it becomes a little bit more complex is that if you've got a phone mounted on your bar like I sometimes do, or if you've got a sat nav, or maybe even a radio in your fairing if you've got one of those big touring bikes, actually just messing around with it while you're on the move is an offence, and you could get points and a fine for doing so. So things like if your phone's on your bars and you're using it for directions, changing directions or reprogramming it, that's an offence. And something that I've noticed that's quite annoying as well is you'll get notifications showing up on the screen when you're trying to read the directions. So swiping it away, fiddling around like that, they're all not allowed. And it doesn't really matter if you're using a sat nav or a phone, any device like that, it's going to be a problem. It doesn't just apply to when you're on the move as well. So if you're sat at the traffic lights, that's not fine. If you're sitting in traffic, that's not fine. And actually they said that there was a study which showed that people playing around with devices when they're sat in traffic actually does contribute to accidents, even though it doesn't seem like it really would. It can do. And I suppose especially in a town like London where you've got a lot of pedestrians who may choose to cross the road outside of a pedestrian crossing between some cars, you know, those people are at risk if you're not really paying attention and you're creeping forward. You could easily squash a leg there. So I do understand, I suppose. And I suppose this all depends really on the lenience of the police. They may just give you a warning if they bother stopping you at all. But it does seem like something that they're cracking down on, so it's up to you whether you take the risk, I guess, as with many aspects of road safety and law. So to avoid any risk at all of being caught, what you got to do is pull over and turn your engine off as well. That's the key thing. You shouldn't have your engine on. You should be pulled over in an actual parking space before you change your radio, before you reprogram your sat nav, before you swipe a text away. Go on, mate. Made it jump. Which seems extreme, and as I say, you know, it's probably unlikely that you would get busted if you were sat at lights and you just tapped a screen to wake it up or something, but it could happen. In the article it also said that the police have deployed a lorry that's going around the country so that the police have a higher vantage point so that they can see down into vehicles. So that's pretty serious. I'm not sure if they're going to bother driving that around central London. It seems like that would be a fruitless exercise, but you never know. Maybe they could just go on the top deck of that bus, actually. Be cheaper. Another thing that I found interesting about this as well is that it applies to anything that just distracts you. So it doesn't have to be, you know, something with a screen. It can be a GoPro, which I use almost every time I ride. I mean, I would normally turn it on at the beginning of the ride and turn it off at the end. But if you're doing a long ride, a few hours touring, the battery life isn't enough to make it through, you know, a 4-hour ride. Like when we went to Bruges a few weeks ago rather. So you do have to turn it on and off when you see something interesting. And that means reaching up, pressing the button. Sometimes it doesn't work first time, so you got to press it again. So again, that's a distraction. Even though it seems very minor, that counts as, you know, messing about with something. You could argue that moto vlogging in general is a little bit of a distraction. I mean, talking to the camera, thinking about what to say, all those things can distract you from what you're doing. So when I'm moto vlogging, if there's a lot of traffic up ahead, or a new road layout, or a junction, or those kinds of things, and I'm not sure where I'm going, then that's when I stop talking and I edit it out. Which is why on some of my rides through London there's a million jump cuts. And the same applies to our intercoms. So me and my wife use the Senna intercoms for pretty much every commute, just to alleviate the boredom of doing the same ride every single day. But there's certain times when she might ask me a question and I don't reply, and it may seem that I'm just being rude or I don't want to answer, but actually it's just occasionally I have to zone out of the conversation and concentrate. So ultimately the advice is to make sure you have a decent phone mount if you want to use your phone. I've got a quad lock there, but a lot of people seem to use something called a RAM mount, which to me looks a bit more cumbersome and clunky, but people seem to like those, and this won't fit every single type of bar. And the other suggestion is to get a Bluetooth headset. So if you want to take a call, you can do it through your helmet, and then just make sure you don't get distracted by the phone on the bars or by taking phone calls. That sort of thing. One feature of the Senna SMH5 headset that I've got that I think is really useful for these types of scenarios is that if you connect it via Bluetooth to your phone, you can switch between. So I might have the intercom running with my wife, but if I hit the button, which I guess I'm meant to pull over to do, but if I hit the main button it switches to my phone, and then if you hit the red button on the back of it you can switch to Siri. And for me that's great because you don't have to touch the screen to access pretty much most of the functionality on your phone. So you could call somebody, you could text somebody, all with your voice. You could make an emergency phone call, 999 if you needed to. I think that is allowed. You are allowed to use your phone to do that, as long as there's no other way to do it safely. But yeah, I think that's an awesome feature, to be able to do all of those things and more just with your voice. Again, you have to reach up to touch the button to get Siri to activate, but common sense says that might stop you from being tempted to mess around with your phone. I think he's forgotten to turn his indicator off, which, oh no, he's done it now, but still it's nice to know it's not only me. Anyway, I'd recommend checking out that article. I thought it was a pretty interesting read. I think the law is probably very strict, but within that there's probably a good aim, which is to get us to all ride safer, and that can only be a good thing. So you just got to think practically about how you can minimize distractions for yourself. Anyway, I don't know what anyone thinks of that law. but I guess you can't have one rule for drivers and then one for bikers, you know. So please do let me know in the comments below what you think, and if you want to see more videos like this, then click subscribe.